The fundamental question that is faced by sports is, do they want, will the industry ever allow somebody to tell the truth on the air? But I don't think that today that will ever happen again. I don't think the industry will allow it.
Dino Costa.
This is Dino in the morning on Sirius XM Sports Zone, Sirius 92 XM 208.
All right, hour number 4, final hour on a Friday, and final hour this week on Sirius XM Sports Zone Radio, Sirius 92 and XM 208. And I first spoke about this on this show, on these channels. Yesterday, I noted Richard Sandomir, in collaboration with James Andrew Miller, with a terrific 3-part series in the New York Times last week about ESPN on many different fronts. And so thoroughly impressed with it was I that I told Kaplan to reach out to Richard Sandomir, who covers sports media for the New York Times, and have him come on and talk more about this. And here he is, Richard Sandomir with the New York Times. Rich, how are you?
Hi, Dino. How are you?
Doing well, guy. And thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time
pleasure.
this morning. Yeah, man, I tell you, has there ever been, I mean, you've covered sports media in different capacities for the Times for a number of years. Has there ever been a time in which sports media has been of such paramount interest to so many people? And we were consuming this news and information on sports media in just voluminous ways these days. I mean, it's really something that has gone off the charts.
Well, there's just so much more of it. There are more networks. There are more people covering it in different ways. When I started doing this in 1991, I think there were like 50 or 60 newspapers that had TV sports critics. Now there are very few of them, but there are blogs, and very powerful blogs like Awful Announcing and some others. And of course, Deadspin is focused so heavily on ESPN. So I think one feeds on the other, and there are more games out there. As we chronicled in the series, the growth of ESPN from one network to 7 networks, or however many they have, there's more out there. You got the NBC Sports Network. You got Fox Sports 1. If you wanted to escape it, you couldn't.
In reading your stories, which were very good, and I've told people to go online and read them if they get an opportunity, it becomes clear to me. And I held out a lot of hope in the months leading to the launch of Fox Sports 1 that they would be able to make a significant dent in ESPN. And we've seen, you mentioned NBC with their new network, and CBS. And I tell you, Richard, I just don't think it's possible. I think they are so well entrenched. They have so much damn money. They're everywhere. One of the things you mentioned in your story, which was key to me, is that I don't think there's a person walking planet Earth right now who can't hum the dun-dun-dun-dun and doesn't immediately identify with that. It just tells you that one little thing there, just how far and deep and powerful the reach of ESPN is.
Well, it tells you what a 34-year head start we'll have on Fox Sports 1. And, when NBC Sports Network was Versus, it really wasn't that competitive in terms of, studio shows and big-time rights. It's very hard to catch up. CBS Sports Network doesn't have a strategy to go heavily on big-time rights. They're more complementary to what goes on the broadcast network. So when you have so many networks and you have contracts with all the major football conferences, I think 27 of all the basketball conferences, it's very hard to. It's a moat that's built not only to build ESPN up, but to keep the competition out. So Fox has some major contracts. There's no doubt that they have it, but I think we calculated that ESPN, all the major ESPN networks have 450 college football games this season, and Fox has 50. So they may have Pac-12 and Big 12, but they don't have the volume. ESPN is a story of volume and building the inventory and finding enough networks to show it on, in part 3 of our series, we talked about the problem they had with warehousing. They had so many events, especially college football and college basketball, so much more product than they had a place to show it. So ESPN begat ESPN2, but only 2 networks. There was still a lot of grumbling, especially among the mid-majors and the smaller conferences, and a startup network, College Sports TV, called CSTV. They made a complaint to the Justice Department saying basically that ESPN was a monopolist. So not long after that, ESPNU started, and ESPN3 expanded. Now they really don't have warehousing problems because ESPN3, being an online network, has unlimited space. ESPNU is fully devoted to college sports. But there are a few conferences that have moved away from ESPN, like Colonial Athletic and Atlantic 10. They're finding exposure on NBC. Conference Mountain West left ESPN 9 years ago to go to CSTV. Now they're back with partially with with ESPN, mainly because we showed how Boise State was an amazing property for ESPN. And now ESPN, gets Boise State home games. So it's kind of a fascinating story of power. I always thought when we started this last year that it was sort of like Robert Caro doing ESPN. And if we can come within 1/10 of the power of Robert Caro's writing, that would be great. But we always thought of this as looking at the power of ESPN, how they got it, how they use it, there'd be plenty more to write if we had more space.
Listen, I've got problems with ESPN on a couple of fronts, but I also acknowledge that they also do very good things. I think the story of ESPN is fascinating if you go all the way back to the roots and you chart their lineage and their growth over the years and what they could be looking at here in the future with increased competition. But it is the competition that I want to note right now, because one of the things that I think has got to be disconcerting to the people at Fox with this new Fox Sports 1, I'm sure you're aware of this. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, Richard, but one of the things that I counted upon with the launch of Fox Sports 1 was the novelty aspect, luring eyeballs and driving ratings, at least in the first several days and weeks. But if you look at the ratings, I mean, they've not been there. The penetration has not been anything substantial, at least up to this point, for Fox Sports 1. And I think that the early returns with ESPN, I think that ESPN sits back. They look at the $6 billion in cable fees that flow into their enterprise annually, which is the highest of any cable operation in existence. And they look at Fox Sports 1, and then they look at the ratings. And I think that they, too, said, listen, they're probably going to get a lot of eyeballs out of sheer curiosity at the very beginning. That didn't happen, and ESPN has got to be even further emboldened by this with the lack of ratings that FS1 has had up to this point in time.
Dino, I do think it's, and one of the reasons I haven't written about Fox Sports 1's ratings so far is that it's less than a month. And yes, you can draw some conclusions that the studio shows are not popular yet, that people haven't been drawn to them, people see no reason to go to from SportsCenter to Fox Sports Live, but this is not a short-term play. These are companies that have built up their inventory with very, very long-term contracts. So, when you look at NBC Sports Network and their struggles to find good studio shows, to find good hosts, the problems with Michelle Beadle and the crossover. She was successful on ESPN. Why is the crossover not successful? Why is she not successful?
Take the NBC Sports Network as a prime example of what I'm talking about. There was a lot of build-up going into that as well. Nobody's watching that network. Why?
Yeah, but you can make a profit off this because of cable fees and cable.
Richard, I'm not talking about the business enterprise. I'm talking about the artistic element and people wanting to go there as a destination. Nobody's watching NBC Sports Network, and I'm asking you: do you have a theory as to why that is?
I think you have to have the personalities people want to see. You have to have the product that people want to watch. So they will draw at NBC Sports Network a lot of viewers for the Olympics, but and they're doing pretty well on English Premier League. That was a pretty good purchase, but they don't have the NFL there. They have NFL studio programming, but they don't have the NFL there. When you have a powerhouse like ESPN with all their networks, with all their online, with all their web stuff, with all their radio, they have built they use the word, I use the word, they have built a moat that is so incredibly incredibly successful. Do you want to switch your habits, even if the average fan has problems with the ESPN here and there? Do you want to change your habits to go to another network when you've gotten what you want from those networks all these years? NBC has not developed the personalities for studio shows to do this. Fox Sports 1 hasn't yet. I think certainly the jury is out on the Canadians who are the anchors for Fox Sports Live, as well as that whole format. Is it a news show? Is it a panel discussion show? Is Crowd Goes Wild a vehicle people want to watch with only, was it one player, one former professional player there in Trevor Price? That will, they want to watch that instead of Around the Horn or PTI. PTI is a show that the producer of Crowd Goes Wild adores, but can you copy that success? Can you imitate that? The PTI benefits from two guys who have been friends for years and colleagues for years with Kornheiser and Wilbon, and when they find substitutes when they're not there, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. It's chemistry. Can you have six guys or four men and two women on Crowd Goes Wild who have never worked before be successful quickly? Does a sports fan give a damn about Regis Philbin? I think that's what you're finding. Mike Florio is a very good information guy on on PFT for NBC, but is he an overwhelming presence that people have to watch, as opposed to the amazing load of stuff you get on ESPN? And you can get Chris Mortensen, you can get any number of their information people. Then you have the NFL Network if you can just stay on football. So it's I think even if Fox Sports 1 and NBC had far better personalities, far more successful ones that they stole from ESPN, it's still hard. It's still hard. And then you throw in the $6 billion in cable fees. Even if Fox Sports 1 gets up to $1 a sub, that's still, by the time they do that, ESPN will cost $7 a sub.
Yeah, right.
So, it's billions and billions and billions. And now, you got Big Ten contract coming up in a couple of years, the NBA coming up in a couple of years. Those are the big things that are left. Everything else is booked until, some as far as 2034 with the SEC deal on ESPN. So this is a very hard area to break into, but I will, because I'm a business reporter, I will say that you can make a profit without having big ratings. And mind you, ESPN doesn't have huge ratings either. But they have the brand, and they have the trust, and they have the people, the amount, the types of demographics that advertisers want, and they have Monday Night Football. They have all these big contracts. Fox Sports 1 is going to be moving a lot of the Saturday afternoon games from Fox onto cable. Joe Buck may go there. Maybe they'll develop some other talent. McCarver's gone after this season. Everything, a lot of stuff is in flux, but ESPN is, they certainly didn't expect to be where they are 34 years ago, but look where they are. It's an astonishing business,
no, it really is.
Any other media business in America.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating on so many levels. It's also Richard Sandomir. He's covered sports media on a couple different levels with the New York Times since 1991. He is on Dino in the Morning, Sirius XM's Sports Zone Radio, Sirius 92 and XM 208. One of the things that people talked about, I theorized, on my shows, Richard, was you look at what Fox was able to do with their news operation and how they have just swamped everyone. And let's not forget, CNN had a significant head start advantage, maybe not as deep as ESPN, but they had a big-time head start. And Fox now collectively swamps every other cable channel across the board. And so you say to yourself, well, will they take this similar approach in terms of vision, style, implementation? Can it be done? They did it with their news division. Can they do it with their sports division? It seems like there are conflicting sorts of philosophies and visions about how to go about this. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, my thought on that is Roger Ailes' success with Fox News Channel is a result. It's attitudinal. It's finding the right anchors. It's not about buying the rights to something. What makes ESPN are the rights to big time conferences and leagues. So you're not buying the rights to the Pentagon. You're not buying the rights to an election. This is entirely. It's a great triumph of politics and attitude and the right people in the right places, and being consistent with how you do that, and having something to say when there isn't a lot of news around. CNN obviously gets good ratings when there's a crisis, when there's a huge amount of news, but they don't seemingly have the personalities to carry them along on a day-to-day basis, so that the ratings are very high. If Bill O'Reilly were on CNN and as a straight-ahead newsman, he probably wouldn't get the ratings. But I remember Bill O'Reilly, local Channel 2 news reporter here in New York. Nobody knew he'd be what he is now. But I think with Fox News, I've always felt that the comparison is a little bit off because ESPN's success is built off 34 years of contracts for events
and Richard,
having anchor shows like SportsCenter.
And not only that, but also the point that I've made in the difference between the kind of a vision that maybe some people have tried to align with Fox News and Fox Sports is that the partnerships come into play significantly in terms of when you're talking about Fox News or you're talking about CNN. You're right. For instance, if Fox News had a partnership with the Pentagon, you would come to expect that they would pull their punches a little bit in terms of their critiques and criticisms and so on and so forth. The same thing is applicable here, whether you're talking about ESPN or Fox or any other organization that has a direct tie or a partnership with said league. They have got to be a little bit careful in terms of what they're going to allow their pundits to say. News divisions don't have those kinds of concerns.
Correct. I mean, that's very true. Now, you could say that because Fox News is aligned with the world of conservative politics, they may pull their punches when they're trying to be nice to a conservative candidate. But it's a different world than the purchasing of rights. So if they own the Pentagon, the rights to news from the Pentagon, well, they'd get all the news from the Pentagon and they'd be nice to them. But it's a very different world. You can say that Fox has a way of doing things on a corporate level, risk-taking and doing things different than the competition. But I don't see that as being, maybe they will take more risk than NBC Sports Network does, and maybe, but I don't see that as being the major thing that's going to make them make them have bigger ratings. It's going to be getting the Big Ten rights. It's going to be getting the NBA, either swapping it from ESPN or TNT, or maybe getting a third package. It's going to be building up those rights. They're not doing this. Back in the late 90s, they had sort of an abortive attempt at competing with ESPN when they kind of united all their RSNs and had Keith Olbermann doing the news, and they had some national stuff, but it didn't work because it was kind of half-hearted. The regionals were always much more important. That ended up being a short-term thing. This is a very, very long-term thing. When you sign affiliate agreements, when you tell affiliates, we're changing Speed Channel, and you're going to be paying more eventually for this All Sports channel, this is a big-time play, whether it's 3 to 5 year contracts or 5 to 7 year contracts with cable operators and satellite and telephone companies. This is not just something to be judged on 3 weeks of ratings of Crowd Goes Wild. But in 10 years, ESPN will probably still be dominant unless they lose their desire, unless Disney loses their desire to spend the money they have to spend to keep it going. But they have protection through the early, through at least the early 2020s on the major rights that they hold.
In the end, whether we're talking about ESPN or we're talking about FS1, Richard, does reality suggest that although there is a great deal of autonomy and independence with these networks to a certain point, because of the partnerships with leagues like the NFL and the NBA and so on and so forth, in the end, can it be argued that the conferences or the leagues such as the NFL, when it comes to content that is driven on ESPN or FS1 or any one of a number of cable outlets that have these partnerships, that content, opinion, punditry is green-lighted or red-lighted by the respective leagues in lieu of this kind of thinking? Just the other day or last week, the news coming out that ESPN pulled out of that Frontline PBS series. In the end, can it be argued that the NFL, in a lot of ways, tells ESPN what they can and cannot be involved with, or what they can and cannot say?
I don't think it's as black and white as that, and I don't think it's a regular moment because, ESPN legitimately has done a lot of concussion reporting that was bound to make.
Okay, you know what? Fine, bring it away from that for a second. Let's say that ESPN next week gives me an hour-long show where I'm riffing on this, that, and the other thing, and I say, listen, I'm going to draw this. I'm not going to make this personal, but I'm going to make an argumentative point here. Several points that, in my estimation, Roger Goodell is a negative element for the NFL, and I'm going to draw out my reasons why A, B, C, D, and E here. And you know that the NFL would call ESPN and say, what the hell are you guys doing? This guy's on your airwaves. We are a valued partner with you guys. You've got the Monday night package. Get this guy off the air as soon as possible. And if he's ever on the air again, it will affect, and if he says the things he says, it is going to affect future contract negotiations between ESPN and the NFL.
When an extreme example like that, sure. I think they make clear their displeasure. We have to go back to the frontline thing. I don't think there's any proof that the NFL said, you get out of this partnership now. I think that after years of a relationship, they don't have to do a wink and a nod. They could just express their displeasure and a decision will be made. There's plenty of reporting that has angered partners, but doesn't necessarily always result in a change. ESPN we had these bookends of the Playmakers thing a decade ago and this, which have very similar, which seem very similar. But, with the NFL, people just weren't paying attention. That trailer that pissed off the NFL was running on the Frontline site since April. So if they wanted to be upset, they could have been upset 2 months ago, but nobody, 4 months ago. But I don't think people were paying strict enough attention to this, especially at ESPN. They admit they weren't paying close enough attention to their lack of editorial control. But I think on an ongoing basis, you're not going to see networks do a lot to piss off their partners. If it's an issue that can't be denied, and, ESPN was pretty vocal about how bad the replacement refs were last year, but can the NFL legitimately say, stop doing that because they're really good? I think the NFL and other partners probably let a lot go by because they know that there's, they can't defend it. Something like this, concussions, it reflects on the Tagliabue era and the first few years of the Goodell era. The concussion issue, that's a very, very difficult thing. Plus, this is before the settlement. So settlement discussions were going on. They're getting, ripped by, what they think is the tone of the concussion documentary. And they had that rather unpleasant lunch at Patroon in New York between NFL and ESPN officials. I think you have to go to a certain level of reporting and allegations, accusations about what a partner is doing for the partner to tell ESPN or any other network, stop that right now. And Playmakers was another example. I think when you pay as much money as these networks do, they have to give them some leeway. And I think that there is a tacit sense of, for the most part, how far you can go.
Okay, let's move away from the NFL and get on to college football here as it pertains to the connection between ESPN and college football. And a lot of fascinating information in this, these three parts that you guys did. And it's Richard Sandomir with the New York Times, did a three-part series that was in the New York Times last week on ESPN, and we're talking about that now. One of the things you point out, and I made mention of this as I kind of teased our conversation earlier on the show, Richard, was that the growth and exposure and the massive popularity of the pomp and circumstance and the pageantry of college football, how much of that has really been directly, it's undeniable when you think about it, and you pointed out in the story, it's undeniable that has been fueled so much by ESPN. College football has moved up to a level that was almost unthinkable, let's say even 30, 35 years ago. But one of the things that was fascinating to me to find out in your story, and let me read the last part of this paragraph, and then you comment on it, because this is crazy when you think about it, how much ESPN impacts college football. You wrote, ESPN has become both puppet master and kingmaker, arranging games, setting schedules, and bestowing the gift of nationwide exposure on its chosen universities, players, and coaches. It almost seems like if it's happening on television with college football as far as ESPN is concerned, it doesn't happen until ESPN gives a full green light and says, okay, play the game.
Well, certainly in many ways that is true. you can see different areas, like with the SEC, ESPN chooses after CBS does, but CBS only has one game on CBS. So you have this full panoply of ESPN networks that can program wherever it wants, whether it's ABC or ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPN3, and certainly when you go forward, the SEC network is a fully owned ESPN network. Down in Big 12 country, the Longhorn Network is an ESPN network, and you look at a channel guide for ESPN channels, and you see there's Longhorn, and soon the SEC network will be there. So yes. All networks, Fox and anybody else carrying college football, has the 6 and 12 day notification for when a game can be scheduled with colleges. But ESPN has so many more contracts than anybody else, so it makes them the real kingmakers. We had a bunch of emails that we got through Freedom of Information that really show, in no illegal way, but in a very graphic way, how ESPN officials plan games. They help, and is more than a clearinghouse. They help determine certain games going in the future. And we got a load of stuff from the University of Cincinnati, and they seek help for we're putting in more luxury boxes. We need a really good partner for a game in 2015. Well, let's go. ESPN says, well, we'll find one. The games that we talked about to lead off the season, like the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Classic.
That was their creation.
2 years ago, they saw that Alabama was not scheduled to play the Labor Day weekend, and they brought the Tide aboard. They have this computer system called PASS, which is kind of a clearinghouse that is used by all the colleges to help schedule games. PASS is owned by ESPN. ESPN, even as we were writing this, they bought their 9th bowl game. They televise nearly every bowl game, and they own 9 bowl games. We started this. They own 7. They bought 2 while we were writing. It's amazing. Now they aren't the biggest bowl games, but they're part of that whole month of bowl games that ESPN has. That's sponsored by Capital One, and they're not highly rated. They're not big payouts, but it's part of that season. It's part of filling the programming void.
Right.
Bowl after bowl after bowl, and for them, a 1 rating, a 2 rating, a 3 rating. That's fine. That's great. Millions of people. Sure. 1, 2, 3 rating. That's millions of people.
Yeah, it can be argued and successfully that the mass commercialization of sports over the last quarter century would not have really maybe come on so fast and so furious without ESPN being that piston in the engine driving all of this. And in addition and concurrent with all of that, Richard, it can be argued that the impact that ESPN has had on college sports and college football specifically has been the piston in the engine that has seen the mass redistribution of teams that have switched conferences for reasons that have everything to do with not rivalries or anything like that, but television money, and ESPN has been at the forefront of all of that.
Well, the president of the University of Florida said the growth of the exposure to college football is directly related to ESPN's increased involvement in it. There's no doubt that realignment is the result of conferences knowing how much money ESPN has to spend. We didn't find that ESPN initiates realignment. We did find that, there is an acknowledgement that there's money out there, and we did an entire piece of the series about Louisville and how for more than a decade they were willing to be scheduled at every midweek time that ESPN could do it. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Saturday night, all the Friday night, all non-traditional times that ESPN pioneered back in the day when we were growing up. It was Saturday afternoon. Well, ESPN took advantage of the fact that there's not enough room on Saturday afternoon to book all the games. So all these midweek games became a huge thing. Some colleges managed all that very well. Louisville managed it brilliantly, so that while in Conference USA they didn't get a big rights fee, they're now in the ACC. They have managed it brilliantly, so that they have all sorts of, they're better recruits, better coaching, more fundraising. They've managed it as well as you could possibly manage that exposure, even while acknowledging, of course, nighttime games kind of upset the campus. But bowl games for Louisville. I mean, it's just it's a very different world that is really fueled by ESPN, and it's an ESPN effect. Even in contractual bidding now, money goes up because if Fox knows they're going to be paying more because ESPN wants to retain stuff. ESPN wants to keep stuff from Fox. They all want to keep things from NBC. So it's money rules, and ESPN has the most money.
And what about the bundling issue, Richard, which has become very prevalent to talk about in the last couple of years? And John McCain tried several years ago to lead the charge to, overturn some things that would allow the consumer to have an a la carte sort of a situation. It was defeated roundly. It doesn't seem as though the bundling is going to come undone anytime soon. And from a political standpoint, you do mention a couple times in the series that you guys wrote that ESPN is very involved in lobbying. ESPN is very involved in taking care of certain politicians via campaign contributions and things of that nature. And this goes far deeper under the surface than I think a lot of people who don't pay that much attention to it would really realize.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the fun parts of doing the series is that the assumption by fans, helping fans recognize that what they're watching is not just a fun network that fulfills, that carries all sorts of stuff and fulfills their desire to watch stuff and follow their favorite teams. It's part of a major media conglomerate that depends heavily on profits from ESPN. Disney has theme parks, it has movies, but the steadiest, most profitable part of that company is ESPN, which Disney bought in 1995, knowing that it was the jewel of the company they were acquiring, and knowing that with the sub fees going up and up and up and up, the gravy train would be sustained, and profits would be great. But we found a lobbying machine that among the many issues that Disney went to Washington on was to preserve the bundle, which companies like News Corp and Viacom and Comcast, they all want to retain the bundle because it's it's important to their business. Without their business doesn't go away. It changes incredibly. So there was never a lot of support in Congress to undo the bundling, and McCain was sort of like Don Quixote, talking about his mother in Sun City, why should she have to pay for something she doesn't watch? And most people don't watch most networks. Cable networks are pretty low rated. But the bundle is what is said to promote diversity among networks, and all these networks would go to business if they didn't have their 10 cents a month subscriber fee. But now, even though it may be just as quixotic a pursuit, McCain is back with another bill to undo the bundle, or at least give incentives to cable operators to give something to do an a la carte thing. But he's been joined by Richard Blumenthal, the junior senator from Connecticut, which is kind of shocking because Connecticut is the home of ESPN, and his predecessors, Chris Dodd and Joe Lieberman, were over the top in their praise for ESPN, their friendships with ESPN anchors. They go to the floor of the Senate on ESPN anniversaries and talk about it, what a great company it is. But Blumenthal, as an attorney general of Connecticut, was very, very big on consumer issues, so he said, you have to assume that I was going to do something like this. It may not pass, but a la carte may become in a different way, depending on how ESPN and basically the whole video world handle the transition to online, because you see all these streaming services, you see there may be a very different world coming in 10 or 15 years. ESPN doesn't think so, but it is planning for it. It's done things to, the Watch ESPN app is a way to maintain the bundle because in order to get all those games on your mobile phones,
Right.
you have to authenticate with your cable operator or satellite operator. So it's but you see things like Aereo, and you see the way things are changing. But as long as ESPN has these long-term contracts to carry the events, I think they feel pretty strong that whatever alternative there is out there, they're going to have the programming that people want, and that's part of the motivating force for how long these contracts have gotten, 10, 15, 20 years. So it's a fascinating world. The underbelly. I mean, I love the story of Congressman Joe Barton, who was the chairman of one of the House Commerce Committee, and he and his wife got like a $6,000 trip to Disney World on the Super Bowl weekend of 2005, and ESPN doesn't carry the game, so they had hospitality in Orlando, and he came in part to look at Disney World to see if it needed theme park regulation as prescribed in a bill that's usually brought up by Congressman Markey. But also at one point during his weekend, he wanted to speak to a bunch of college, football executives with ESPN who would tell him why there is no college football playoff. That would be the basis of his of hearings coming up. So a bunch of executives were summoned at late morning one day, and they sat for a little while, with Barton and the chief lobbyist for Disney, Preston Patton, and he understood from experts, who he couldn't find at another network at that point. ESPN is the place to go for a congressman who wants to learn about theme park regulation and the college football playoff. So it's a huge company, 6,000, 7,000 people. They got a lot of expertise there. They have their own R&D organization. They have hundreds of people working in research and development. It's they help fund an R&D place in Florida at Full Sail University, if you've ever heard of that. So they have planned for whatever thing is possible. When 4K happens, they'll go to 4K. They're building a new digital center just for more NFL program, more bigger sports center, more digital effects. It's a pretty astonishing company. But again, generally people see what's on TV or on their mobile phone. We were more than happy to show what happened when CSTV complained to the Justice Department and said, they're warehousing, and how CSTV believes that just complaining to the Justice Department, which opened an investigation, helped them get contracts in 2004 and 2005. So it's a world that I was happy to plunge into because I didn't know that much about the college sports realm.
Well, listen, I commend both yourself and James Andrew Miller on some great and insightful writing here with a more than interesting subject with ESPN and this whole thing. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and spending some time with me, Richard. And my last question to you, now that you guys are done with this three-part series, I'm wondering when the three-part series on Sirius XM Radio is coming out.
Well, I don't know if the partnership will last through that, but I do want to mention that the third reporter in Steve Eater was as essential as any of us. It was a real three-man partnership that the reporting in each series, everything was cross-pollinated, and you really can't tell who nobody had a real part to his own. It was a real collaborative effort that occurred over a year, although we did other things during the year also.
All right, you guys did a great job. Richard, you're a good guy. Enjoy this week, and thanks so much
Thank
for
you,
your
Dino.
time.
Pleasure talking to you.
Richard Sandomir, New York Times, has been covering sports media since 1991. Three-part series on ESPN. Their dominance and what they're looking forward to here in the future, especially in the world of increased sports media competition. 866-522-2846, 866-522-2846. This is Dino in the Morning on Sirius XM Sports Zone Radio. Sirius 92, XM 208. Hour number 4, bring you up to the top of the hour. We're done then for the week, and Lord willing, come back on Monday with a full schedule of shows next week. Kaplan at the controls producing in New York. Yours truly here with Mr. Joshua in the great cowboy state of Wyoming, USA. Back with more right after this.
Never before has sports radio sounded like this. This is Dino in the morning on Sirius XM Sports Zone.
All right, I knew I wasn't going to have enough time. Didn't I say that at the outset today, that I wasn't going to have enough time to get into everything I wanted to get into? I mean, I look at the clock right now, and it is 14 minutes to the hour. We get out of here at about 3 minutes to the hour. So not going to be going to be able to get into as much NFL and baseball. I really kind of, briefly touched on that. I'm telling you, 4 hours sometimes is just not enough. Just not enough. And as we hit the final few minutes here on this Friday, September the 6th show, I will open up the phone lines to get your feelings on the first 2 days of Dino in the morning here on Sirius XM Sports Zone Radio, Sirius 92 and XM 208. I think that, Kaplan, I've been true to my word that nothing would change here in terms of, my opinion and my commentary and my wanting and need to tell things as I see them. But we really have not added some of the additional elements that were not a part of the other show that are eventually going to be a part of this show.
Right, you get all the good stuff from the old show and probably a lot more new stuff as we get going here.
Yeah, that's on the horizon in both the short and the long term here. But we've got a lot of work to do here. We've got a lot of work to do, and in putting down the tracks of a show here in the morning, in the AM hours, as opposed to the last 5 years being in the PM hours. And listen, let's also be frank. The show is kind of put behind the eight ball because of beyond the press release that was put out by the company earlier this week, Kaplan. It's in terms of visibility and promotional aspects and website presence and things like that. We have not been the benefactors of such things up to this point in time. So, and then you throw in that it's a disjointed. Look, we're not happy with the state of the channel right now, not by a long shot. It's a disjointed sort of a programming lineup at this point right now. This has not been a marquee destination channel, I don't think ever, to be honest with you. And then there's the name Sports Zone, which has this always been known as the Sports Zone channel?
I don't
is
know.
That always been the name of this, or is that new?
I think it used to be called something else. I think that's a recent name.
Because there's another name. I submitted a name to them weeks and months ago that I think would be better, more catchy, more memorable. But again, I don't have influence in that regard. But we got a lot of work to do here in terms of building out this show in the morning hours, and then also hopefully the channel, which is going to take on a more refined look and feel in the next few weeks and months ahead. There are some things that I'm very aware of in terms of additions to the channel, which I'm not permitted to talk about right now. Things that that I know are going on that I think that listeners are going to be very happy about. And by the way, I still don't have an answer. I guess Tim is going to be out here. Tim Sabian, who's programming this show as the PD, is going to be out here in Wyoming meeting with me next week. And, of course, I plan on giving Tim my thoughts on a number of different things, and I'm sure he plans to do the same. But the show on repeat, Kaplan, is one of the I think is a crucial component to this whole thing, because if we can replay this show later in the day, and I don't care if it would be at 12 midnight or 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., or 2 o'clock in the morning, I think that a repeat of this show would go a long way toward continuing to build, an audience here. So,
yeah, absolutely, that'd be great.
But we have no question that management is firmly behind this show and this channel, and wants to create something of value, and views this show as a core asset within the Sirius XM food chain. And I was given assurances that they would view it as such. And so going forward, I'm very excited about the future and what we're going to be able to do here. But I would more than be willing to take your phone calls on the first 2 days here and what you think. If you've noticed any discernible difference in terms of my style and in terms of my presentation. I asked Kaplan this during the timeout, and you came back and you said you really don't see a difference.
Yeah, I don't see any difference. I listen pretty closely.
And I think more than anything, it's just people getting used to me in a new time.
Yeah.
Because you said before, people don't like to change. They become accustomed to something, and they're resistant to change oftentimes.
Yeah, you've thrown their whole day off, in a sense. People have the schedule.
Have thrown their day off. Well,
yeah, their schedule around your show.
Yeah, but I mean, it's I guess, but that was to be expected. I think no.
Yeah,
that was to be expected. With some people and their feelings, but for me too. I mean, it's a radical difference. Obviously, it's a change in terms of recoordinating my body's clock. I mean, it's the whole reason I decided to decline the opportunity to go down to Denver last night and take in the game live, because I just felt that I'd be better served, especially with us working in such a condensed period of time, Kaplan, and not having a lot of lead time to know what was going on in terms of when they wanted to debut this thing. I just felt if I went to the Broncos game last night, I would have got back, especially now consider we had the long delay. You had the long delay with the lightning and the weather and stuff like that.
Yeah, you would have been up.
So it's a 90-minute. Listen, it's not an excruciating ride by any stretch. I mean, it's 90 minutes. It's a piece of cake. But if I had gotten out of the stadium by, and I can't remember what time the game ended exactly, but if I had gotten out of the stadium at, let's say, 11 o'clock, I mean, it's 12:30 by the time I get home. Now, take into account that, the first day on the show with the new hours was yesterday, so I'm still kind of recalibrating my body's clock and recoordinating things. I get home, who knows, maybe it takes me another hour to get into bed. I've got 2 hours, with my head on a pillow, wake back up, come in here, do another 4 hours. So I figured, let me get a little rest last night. And even then, I didn't really sleep that well last night, because my mind is on this new endeavor here. And my mind is on this, trying to get myself prepared for the show. So anyhow, I do have some time, a little bit of time to take some calls. Let me get to Craig in the Bronx, New York, and he is on Dino in the Morning. It is Sports Zone Radio. It's Sirius 92. It's XM 208. Hi, Craig.
Hey, Dino, what's going on, man? I was dying to find out what was going to happen with you, man. I've been gone for like the last month, back and forth between here and Florida, and I was in limbo, not knowing what was going on. And finally, I just found it. Today the first day?
No, yesterday.
All right, I just got back from Florida again today. I had a 6 in the morning flight, and I just threw this channel on, and I heard you. I was like, oh, cow, I can't believe it. But this is your new gig now, 7 to 11 on this channel?
This is it, and I don't know how long, well, Eastern time, yes, and I don't know how long you've had an opportunity to sample the show today, but have you noticed any difference at all?
No, my flight landed at 9:30, so I didn't get a chance to sample it.
Okay.
But I'm definitely going to be, into it again now. But like you were saying real quick before, with the new time slot, everyone's upset and everything. They don't like change. I don't like it either, but I know deep down it's going to be better. Definitely going to like it for these hours. I can listen to you during the day when I'm doing all my stuff. I don't got to get stuck in my car at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night in my driveway, not going inside. So in the long run, it's going to be better for everybody. I just hope it's the same or even better.
That's what I'm trying to do here, Craig. And do me a favor, listen to the show for a little while. Give me a call back. Tell me what you think.
Definitely. I'll talk to you during next week or whatever. See what's up.
Appreciate it, my friend. Have a great day and a good weekend. And another thing about the channel, Kaplan. I mean, listen, I want to be a positive ambassador and an advocate for what we're doing here. I don't even know who's on before me. I don't know who's on after my show's over. I don't know any of this. So I'd love to say, hey, stay tuned for. I don't even know who's on after me.
After you comes All Sports with Terrell and Ryan.
Who?
Yahoo Sports. I don't know, Terrell and Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, so again, I don't even know how long that show's even going to be here, as they reconstitute the channel and rebrand it and so on and so forth. But it's interesting. It's you go into this wide-eyed and you hope for the best and you think everything's going to work out, and I certainly do. But it's kind of, I feel like I'm on an island here, by myself. Somebody from Yahoo Sports Radio is going to follow me here now. Kaplan, we're off and winging this week with a new show in a new time. It is Dino in the Morning, Sirius XM Sports Zone Radio, Sirius 92 and XM 208. You want to email me, send me a personal message. It is talk, T-A-L-K, talk to, T-O, talk to Dino, at gmail.com. Talk to Dino at gmail.com. Mile high salute to you, Mr. Joshua. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the college football tomorrow, the NFL on Sunday. Back Monday, Lord willing. Dino in the morning, Sirius XM Sports Zone Radio. It's Sirius 92. It's XM 208.